So here we are, the final day of my 5 days live, talking a little bit more about what I call the small stuff, but also covering off 4 lessons that I have learned through my fitness journey that I feel uh, valuable and worth sharing because they have also been useful in other areas of my life. They don't just apply to fitness. And this kind of ties back into what I've said before about these insights, being able to apply what we learn in one situation to another situation and actually starting to join the dots and make sense of our life. So, my first lesson was learning that the importance of setting yourself up for success. That cannot be overrated. uh, then I shared the lesson around, I have to look at it now. I have to look at about prep, didn't I? Talking about the importance of preparing and simplifying stuff again so that you're not going back to that idea of not overcomplicating things. And these lessons again can be applied elsewhere. Food prep, it's not just for bodybuilders. And yesterday I covered off the probably the most challenging one for me and an invaluable lesson. Number 3 was getting clarity on your why. Why are you doing what you're doing? Why is it important to you? Digging really deep, getting emotionally connected to the reason why you want to achieve something. And I was talking with a client last night about the value of the language around it as well. The I'll give it a go, I'll try, I'll see what happens versus I know I can do this. I've got it in me with the right tools, the right support. I can't fail. Very powerful difference. And getting in touch with the why you can do it, why it's really important to hit that goal, make that change, whatever it is, that's going to fuel you through the dark times. And so today's one is slightly different, slightly lighter, but cannot be, we can't lose it, rather, it cannot be underrated. It often is underrated, and that is measuring what matters, noticing changes, taking data, however you like to frame it, tracking your progress, knowing where you're going. I was talking to a friend about this idea of if you're not really sure where you're going, any road looks interesting. We did talk about that idea of sometimes, these roads pop up. We do detours, but we still have that idea that we know roughly the direction we're heading in. Tapping into analogies can be useful because they can help make sense of why we need to do this. For example, I've been sharing a lot with people around this idea of once you know your goal, you know the outcome that you want, asking yourself that really simple question, is what I'm doing today getting me closer towards where I want to be? And if not, what do I need to change? What do I need to do differently? Completely non judgmental, powerful statement. Tony Robbins talks about this, ask better questions. And that is a really good question. Not why do I always do this? What's wrong with me? But is what I'm doing getting me closer or further away? And if not, what do I need to change? What could I do differently? But the idea of tracking your progress and actually noticing what you're doing and what is leading you closer to where you want to go is grounded in behavioral science. So when I was doing my fitness journey, when I was doing my training in terms of weights, time spent at the gym, what actual plans you're following, all of that made perfect sense to me. Tracking it, noticing, because what you're also doing, what I was also able to add into that was how was I feeling, and on my flat days, had I done too much? If I was feeling really tired, and I'd look back at, had I lifted too much? Had I pushed myself just a bit too much? When I was feeling good, what had I done differently? And starting to notice. So you're viewing it with more awareness, you're viewing it with actual data as opposed to just this feeling. Because sometimes our feelings don't tell us the whole truth, or we attribute those feelings to something that actually isn't going to help us. And often that is, it's just me, it's the way I am. And that feeds back into that idea of a story, the story we tell ourselves as to why we can't do what we want to do or why we're not successful. And there are a lot of stories linked in to health and fitness. And I've heard a few of them. And I've told a few myself. We need to be calling ourselves out because we get into a habit of speaking about our fitness journey or our efforts in a way that don't support us. So if we can be a little bit more constructive in how we view this by actually taking data, actually noticing, what am I doing? And is it getting me closer to where I want to go? And in terms of, data collection sounds really grand, doesn't it? It can be really simple. Just have your calendar, tick off, went to the gym, tick off, did this, tick off, did that. Don't overcomplicate it. Keep coming back to that, set yourself up for success. As you get better at it, you can raise the criteria, you can add in more stuff, but make sure that what you're collecting, the information that you're collecting, is supporting your growth and your progress. Some of you will have heard of me talking about my scales story, getting on the scales. And when you're on that weight loss journey or a fitness journey, whatever you like to think of it, the scales can be that shifting point for many people. And I have not been on the scales for a long. I'll tell a lie. I have been on the scales. I have not looked at the scales reading. Fiona, my nutritionist, looks at the reading and gives me feedback based on her collective data and her knowledge of what I am also doing and trying to achieve. I do not look at scales because I have an issue around numbers. And my brain makes all sorts of little stories around numbers. And I said to myself a long time ago, is getting on the scales and looking at what those scales tell you, is that getting you closer to being relaxed and excited and motivated and focused on fitness, or is it taking you further away? And it was taking me further away. It was not good for me. It didn't work for me. And it also wasn't telling me the whole truth. And I needed to be truthful with myself. The fact that I was working out flat tack, I was working hard, I was following my nutrition plans, I was doing the stuff, the behaviors that matter. So I started measuring those, and I started to be more aware of where my focus was. And although the scales do have their place, I just kept reminding myself they don't tell the whole truth, and they weren't supporting me in those early days. And then it just became a habit. I just no longer got on them and looked at them. And when I hear somebody who's on the scales every other day, I rarely hear that they are having a blast and really enjoying themselves and excited about their journey. The two do not seem to go together. So have a think about how you're measuring your progress. And are you measuring it in a way, are you talking about it in a way that's keeping you excited and keeping you driven and keeping you inspired? Because we can also take data like the scales and we can start to punish ourselves. You haven't achieved, you haven't this isn't working. Why do you always do that? All those repeated words that do not empower us and do not give us useful information that enables us to keep on track. And this is that ties nicely into that whole idea of sustainability. If we want this journey to be ongoing, which it is anyway, whether we want it to or not, if we want to actually enjoy this and not just throw everything out the window because it's all too hard and you're not feeling good, if we want to keep that element of excitement and enjoyment and interest and curiosity around where we might end up, we need to be thinking about how we're talking about ourselves. And this ties back into what I said right at the beginning, which is that's where it all starts. And that's the easiest thing to initially make some changes. Just tweak the way you speak about yourself. So, from a point of view of keeping it simple with data collection, just use the good old tick sheets on your calendar. You don't need to go out and spend a lot of money on a fancy whatever. You don't need to spend tons of time. The other thing which can be useful is the good old post-its, jotting down notes, sticking them on calendars, sticking them in diaries of what you did, how often, and keep tying it back into how do you feel? How do you feel? Are you making progress? And if you don't feel good about it, if you don't feel like you're making progress, maybe you're missing some small stuff. Look for the small stuff that matters. Look for the fact that you did get up at a certain time and get to the gym, or that you did manage to have your water intake, or whatever it is. Just look for something that you can say, yes, I did it. I'm making progress. And I'm going to leave you with something that I heard from a training I did the other day, which I thought was really powerful. And it may or may not be related to this overall discussion, but it was so powerful that I wanted to share it with you. And it ties in nicely with something that I've also shared a lot, which is the 80-20 principle. And this kind of idea of measuring and collecting data links into that. I am going to link it into that. The 80-20 principle can be applied in all sorts of areas, but the most common one that I've been sharing with people is that it's 80% nutrition, 20% exercise, for example. So you want to be noticing that 20% exercise and not be having 80% exercise, 20% food, which is how most people tackle health and fitness. If I do 80% of my time is on focused on exercise, somehow that magical 20% of food will sort it out. And unfortunately, we know it is to the contrary. But this quote comes from Warren Buffett, and Warren Buffett, for those of you who don't know, is probably one of the most famous investors. Gosh, I don't know how old he is now, but he must be absolutely one of the most interesting people that I would like to speak to at dinner. Came from nothing, and from a point of view of investing in shares and stocks and knowing where to get in and where to get out, he is the master. So when he says something, it's usually worth usually worth listening to. So this statement was, and I'm going to read it because else I'm going to butcher it. He said, I focus on the final 5% in anything that I'm dealing with. I close that loop. And I sort of struggled with that. I focus on the final 5%. And I thought, And the guy that was giving the lecture put it into perspective. And he was talking about washing the dishes. And I thought this was a great analogy. Talk about measuring data, taking data, measuring what matters. He said, I was trying to help out around the house more. So he said I would wash the dishes and put them on the side to dry. And he said, after reading that quote by Warren Buffett, he said, I thought, where can I apply that final 5% in daily life? And he said, I realized, for example, the job of doing the dishes, the final 5% was drying the dishes and putting them away. And he said that final 5% made the job complete. And too often we are missing that final 5% in so many areas. And that can be the difference between getting so far and actually nailing it. And I applied it to the idea that I've shared this with you from a fitness perspective. You know, that final 5% in a marathon is the last 2Ks. Being able to get that last 2Ks done, because that's the drop off point. That's where so many people finish, stop. So maybe that final 5% in wherever you are right now in your life is actually collecting data and noticing the progress so that you actually feel like you're getting somewhere. The missing 5% is taking note of your progress, actually writing it down and giving yourself some feedback and saying, I've come this far. I'm getting somewhere. It's small steps, but I'm getting somewhere. And maybe that could be the difference between feeling like you are getting nowhere to actually going, yeah, I am on track. I am making it happen. So, food for thought. Great quote. Great quote. So, here endeth my 4 lessons for the week. I have uploaded these to YouTube, and I would love to hear your thoughts on these lessons and if you manage to see some connection where you can apply them in your daily life, because after all, that is where it all comes together. Joining the dots, putting it into play, and remember that whole idea of it's not more information, it's actually applying what we know. And I think this is why these lessons for me were so interesting, because I wasn't learning something new. I'm simply applying what I know already in other areas and sharing that with other people. And just starting to get some cohesion in your life through those connections, those dots. This worked here, now I can apply this here. I don't need to learn a whole new set of stuff. So, and remember, it's always easier with somebody supporting you. That is also the missing link, isn't it? Accountability. So, on that note, I'm going to wish you a wonderful weekend, and I will be sharing more because I've had some ideas. I'd love to do a workshop, I'd love to take this to the next level, and I will be sharing more about that soon. So, I will be back with some more information. Catch up with you soon, guys. Have a wonderful weekend.